Is cropping in post-production forbidden in street photography? I know a lot of people think so. They're puritanists in that sense. But what do I think? Is cropping crapping? Hi, it's Peter here, and let's get right into the business. If a good photo is cropped even ever so slightly, the relative proportions, the play of proportions, are sure to be destroyed, and besides, it is highly unlikely that a badly composed shot will be saved by trying to frame it anew in the darkroom. Cropping the negative under the enlarger, the integrity of the initial vision is lost. This quote is from the father of street photography, Henri Cartier-Bresson, and I can see why many of you maybe think that you're not supposed to crop your photographs if it's a street photograph afterwards, and maybe some of the nature and wildlife photographers think alike. But I will give you 5 reasons why I think cropping is totally okay. Well, the first one is, why should manufacturers decide what is the right aspect ratio for your photographs? When street photography was new, it was actually made possible because of Leica and 3:2 aspect ratio of 35mm film. The whole idea of a 35mm film was invented in Thomas Edison's lab, and I have to check the name who was the actual inventor. It was William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. He was working for Thomas Edison. What he did, he sliced this way the 70mm film, which became a 35mm film. And the reason they started using 35mm in film industry, in motion pictures, was the combination of the cost of the film and the image quality. It was a perfect balance. It didn't, you could save a lot of film by making it a little bit smaller, but still the image quality was good enough for the wide and the big screen. When 35mm became popular in photography was in the 20s, when Leica invented 35mm cameras. And what they did was they used 36x24mm area on the film, and that how it became 3:2. Of course, later there were, or before that even, there were 1:1 or square format, 6:7, 4:5, all and whatnot with the big cameras. But why I'm talking about 3:2 is because of that is the most common aspect ratio that was used in classical street photography. Of course, later we also have 4/3 and 16:9 and whatnot. But why would a technical, practical innovation decide what aspect ratio my images should be in 2025? What if I want my photographs to be 21:9 aspect ratio? Well, we don't have a sensor that is that size or that aspect ratio. What I have to do is crop. So why would a manufacturer decide what is the best aspect ratio for my photos? I think it's the photographer's decision. So cropping is totally fine because of this, in my opinion. The second reason is maximizing limited equipment. Well, what I mean by limited equipment is, of course, the focal length. Sometimes it's just impossible to be close enough. Cropping is totally okay to make the image better in that sense. This is something that I do all the time. Well, this image is a typical example of that. I was on the other side of this big crossing or this intersection. There was this restaurant which I worth of taking a picture, and then I saw this gentleman with the nice suit and the hat. He was a real French gentleman. This is taken in Strasbourg a couple of years ago. And the only way I could take the photograph with the 40mm lens is to just take the shot and crop it later. With the new technology like Topaz Photo AI, I can enlarge the photo and make some more pixels to it and make it bigger if I need to. The only reason to have more megapixels than 26 that I usually have is the reason that I can crop it better. The image quality would be better. If like a 40 megapixel sensor would be beneficial for me, because I do cropping quite a bit or quite a lot, and usually not cropping that much, but I do it a lot. And by the way, this image is in the cover of my new book about street photographs. It's called From Snapshots to Stories. And if you're interested in the book, just click the link down below and see how you can already buy it. But then why would you buy a book that's not finished? Well, click the link and find out why. There is a benefit for you. But let's get back into the business. Refining composition. In street photography, we cannot always make the perfect composition. When we walk in the streets, there's so many things happening. People are walking back and forth and cross your frame. You're framing something, somebody walks in cross, and you can't really control that at all. So there were so many elements in the city that you cannot control. They are just randomly moving towards wherever. And sometimes there might be a hand in the corner of the image, or someone might walk and block part of the frame. The thing that happened that you are photographing is just something that you want to record and want to share with others, and you think it's a compelling image. So why not crop the distracting thing out of the way? I think it's totally fine, because it's also about you pre-visualizing what the final crop would be. It's exactly the same thing with the previous thing where you were not close enough. You can just crop it later, but to have the vision in your head helps a lot when making the cropping in post-production. If you already know what you want, then it's no problem to crop the image afterwards. The most important thing is the end result, not always the technique, how you achieved it. Of course, the technique might help you to achieve it, but it's not the defining thing. If it's something is hard to photograph, it is still the photograph that matters, not how hard it is or easy it is. It's the photograph itself. It's good enough, compelling, then it's a good image. It doesn't matter if it's cropped or not. Correcting mistake is the next one. We're not perfect. We all make mistakes. Every time we go out and photograph, we miss something, we make mistakes, and we might make a mistake in the composition. We might miss something when we photograph. The situation is fast, like we already talked about. We might miss the perfect composition, and we can refine it later to make the image better. Just to make the image better by, correcting our mistakes. And I think it's totally okay, because as I said, we make mistakes all the time. And if the end result is better after correcting the mistake in post-production, I think it's totally fine. Remember that. Try to make as good composition as possible when you're photographing. But when you make a mistake, this is a cure for that. But learn how to make the composition. That will make you a better photographer. And before we get into the next one, I remind you there will be an extra tip. And then, of course, the whole reason for these enhancements and cropping is to make better stories. All these things that I've said, they kind of overlap each other, and the whole base thing is we're making mistakes and the cities are very busy and we might not always get the composition we want for many different reasons, like we already talked about. But the whole reason is to make the story better. Sometimes we see the image later when we come back and look at our computer and see that, hey, wait a minute, the story is right there. So we crop it there to make the image look better for the viewer. And we can guide the viewer's eye also with cropping a little bit. That's always something. And as I said, these things overlap. And also, if we see some detail that we maybe missed when we could crop it to emphasize more of that detail. But before we get into the extra tip, what are your thoughts on cropping? Is it crap, or how much do you crop, and how do you see yourself in this matter, cropping or not cropping? And the extra tip, since the title had the word enhance, it's not only cropping, it's also about image editing, which has the same goal as the cropping. We want to guide the viewer's eye to the subject or the way we want the eye to be wandering around the image. And one thing is vignetting. Make a little vignette to close the attention towards your subject. When you're darkening the edges, the eyes are more concentrated into the center of the image and kind of bounce back from the darker edge. If you have something that is really bright on the edge, it might make the viewer's eye to bleed out of the image, and the composition might not be that strong. And the second thing is dodge and burn. And dodging and burning is basically brightening and darkening parts of the image, and this is called the local adjustments. We darken the images in the parts that we don't want people to pay attention that much, and brighten the area where we want people or the viewer to pay more attention to. And this is also about light. If we can do that while we're photographing, leaving stuff in the shadow that we don't want people to see or are too distracting towards your main subject, then do it over there. But you can do it afterwards a little bit. Of course, you can't change the light really, but you can emphasize the dark area and brighten up the bright areas to make the viewer's eye to be concentrated on the subject. And I think editing, cropping, and these two things are very important in the whole process of making a compelling photograph. And here you can watch the video about the image that is in the cover of my book. There is a story how I used Topaz Photo AI to upscale the image and how much the image actually was cropped. But hey, thanks for watching and bye for now.